They act like you never mattered, like what you shared was just a passing thing, a moment that came and went, like you were nothing, more than a brief story in their life. But you can feel it, can't you? Something in their silence gives it away. Something in the way they avoid your name. Something in the way they overcompensate for their indifference. People don't erase what never mattered. They only pretend to forget what still burns, somewhere they can't reach. When someone pretends you never mattered, it's not because you were insignificant. It's because you were too significant. You touched places in them they didn't know existed. You stirred emotions they thought they had outgrown. You made them feel. And when people like that feel too deeply, they panic. They scramble to regain control, to reframe the story, to make it look like they never cared, because admitting they did would mean losing the upper hand. So they rewrite history. They minimize what you had. They act like you were overinvested, like you were emotional, naive, too intense. But that's just projection. They have to paint you as the fool, so they don't have to face the truth that they were the one who lost something real. You see, denial is easier than heartbreak. Pretending you meant nothing feels safer than admitting you meant everything. Because if they admit that, they'd have to feel the loss. They'd have to feel what they've done. And some people would rather live in delusion than sit with the weight of their regret. Maybe they post pictures now, smiling, thriving, unbothered. Maybe they talk to new people. Maybe they even convince their friends that you were just a lesson, but their behavior isn't peace. It's performance, and performance always cracks. If you look close enough, you'll see it. That small shift in their eyes when your name is mentioned, that hesitation when someone brings up old memories, that sudden defensiveness when someone says, "You two were good together." That's not nothing. That's not indifference. That's the residue of someone who still feels too much and is desperate not to show it. When you matter deeply to someone, they can't erase you. They can only bury you. And what's buried isn't gone. It just waits for the quiet moments. When they're alone, when the lights go out, when they scroll through old photos at 2 a.m. and stop, just for a second, on the one where you were both laughing. They'll tell themselves it's nothing, that they were just curious, that they've moved on. But the heart always remembers what the ego tries to forget. That's the truth they don't want to face. They didn't lose someone. They lost safety. They lost connection. They lost the version of themselves that felt seen. And that's the hardest part. They can't recreate that. Not with someone new. Not with distraction. Not with pretense. Because you can't rebuild something. That was never about control. You can only experience it once. And once it's gone, you feel the emptiness in everything that follows. They may act detached. They may even laugh about it now. But detachment is not healing. It's armor. And every piece of armor hides a wound. You didn't just mean something to them. You exposed something in them. You made them confront parts of themselves they've spent years hiding from. And instead of thanking you, they resented you for it. Because love, real love, forces truth to the surface. It holds a mirror up and says, "Look," and not everyone can handle what they see. So, when they act cold, when they pretend like you were just a chapter they've closed, understand what's really happening. They're not unaffected. They're in defense mode. This is them trying to rewrite the ending. So it hurts less to remember. They'll say you were dramatic, that you wanted too much, that they never really saw a future with you. But that's the script they tell themselves to avoid facing how much they still feel. Because the truth, they did see it. They saw everything. And that's what scared them. They thought keeping their walls high would protect them, that staying detached would keep them safe. But all it did was rob them of something rare, something real. And now, in their quiet moments, they feel it. That hollow ache where you used to fit. They'll pretend it's not there. They'll say they're fine. But if you've ever been that person, you know fine is just another word for not okay. They act like you never mattered. But they think about you in metaphors now. You've become a song lyric, a half-finished text they never sent, a scent that stops them in their tracks. You're not forgotten. You're just buried under their pride. And here's the truth you need to remember. Their silence doesn't erase your impact. Their pretense doesn't undo your meaning. They can suppress emotion, but they can't delete memory. Because love doesn't vanish. When it's denied, it lingers. It hides in the pauses between words, in the gaps between relationships, in the moments they feel something new and realize it doesn't feel the same. You were not too much. You were the mirror of their too little. You showed them what connection could be, and when they couldn't meet it, they decided to destroy the evidence. So they act unbothered, dismissive, superior. But that's not strength. That's self-protection. Because admitting your worth would mean facing their own weakness. And you've grown past needing that validation. You've learned that closure doesn't come from them finally admitting you mattered. It comes from you knowing you did, that your love wasn't wasted, that your care wasn't foolish, that your presence left something behind, even if they'll never say it out loud. Because deep down, they know, even if they never admit it, even if pride keeps their mouth shut, they know you mattered. And they'll spend years trying to pretend otherwise, not realizing that pretense is its own confession. So if they act like you never mattered, smile, because that's the clearest sign you did. At first, their silence feels convincing. Their composure looks solid. You almost start to believe it, that maybe they really have moved on. But indifference is easy to fake when the wound is still fresh. It's distance that tells the truth. Because time doesn't heal denial, it exposes it. Weeks pass, then months, and that false calm they built around themselves starts to tremble, not all at once, just in moments. Little cracks in the armor, a song that hits too close, a dream they can't shake, a quiet night where everything goes still, and their thoughts start whispering your name. They'll tell themselves it's nothing, that they're just remembering, not feeling. But deep down, they know the difference. Memory is neutral. This isn't. This is longing in disguise. They'll scroll through old messages sometimes. Not to miss you, they'll say, just to see how far they've come. But the truth? They're looking for traces of the person they used to be. Because you were the only one who made them feel something beyond themselves. They don't miss control. They miss connection. And they'll never admit that, not even to themselves. See, when someone acts like you never mattered, they're really trying to protect the version of themselves that failed to love you right. Because acknowledging what you meant means confronting their own capacity to lose something precious. It means admitting they pushed away what others spend lifetimes searching for. And not everyone can live with that truth. So they build stories instead, ones where they were the calm one, and you were the chaos, where they were the realist, and you were the dreamer. But stories like that don't hold up under silence, because silence has a way of showing who's actually at peace and who's pretending to be. Maybe they'll try again with someone new. Maybe they'll pour their energy into distraction, a rebound, a routine, a new happy. But love that's unfinished doesn't fade. It mutates. It shows up as irritability, as restlessness, as that sudden wave of sadness they can't explain. It's not about the present. It's about you, the one they keep insisting they don't miss, the one their heart keeps calling for. when they're too tired to lie to themselves. You were the calm before their ego took over, the warmth before their fear built walls, the mirror that showed them everything they wanted to be capable of, and everything they still weren't. So now, instead of healing, they perform. They post louder. They smile harder. They talk about moving on. But none of it feels real. Because moving on doesn't require an audience. Only pretending does. They'll tell people they're fine. They'll say they've learned their lesson, that they're better off now. But when you mean too much to someone who doesn't know how to feel deeply, the only lesson they learn is how to regret quietly. They'll replay moments you've long forgotten, analyze every word you said before walking away. Wonder what you're doing now, and who gets to hear your laugh. They'll scroll by your name on social media and pause just long enough to feel something twist inside. That twist, that's the truth, breaking through the pretense. And sometimes that truth hurts more than the breakup ever did. Because losing you wasn't about losing a person, it was about losing access to a version of themselves that felt understood. And that kind of loss doesn't go away with distance, it echoes. You'll feel it too sometimes. That strange energy when their name crosses your mind. That quiet pull you can't explain. It's not coincidence, it's resonance. Because emotion doesn't disappear, it lingers between two people who never really said what they meant. They feel it too, but they'll never admit it. Because admitting it would mean undoing all the pretending they've built. So instead, they'll keep performing indifference, keep choosing pride over peace, keep pretending they're unaffected. But look closely, and you'll see it in the way they still check who viewed their story, in the way they still mention you indirectly, as if you're an unspoken ghost, hovering around their conversations. They'll say, I don't care anymore. But their tone gives it away. Their eyes give it away. Their patterns give it away. Because people who truly don't care don't need to convince anyone. And yet, you stay quiet, not out of pride, but out of clarity, because you've learned something they haven't. That peace doesn't need performance. You don't need to prove you're healing. You don't need to erase what was real, to honor what's next. That's what separates you. They run from the pain. You learn to sit with it, to understand it, to grow from it, to let it shape you, without letting it harden you. And that's the kind of healing that can't be faked. They'll see that one day, maybe when you cross paths again, when your calmness unsettles them, when your eyes no longer carry the same ache. They'll feel it, that shift, that realization that the person they once took for granted has become untouchable, not out of spite, but because you finally learned that love without respect isn't worth holding on to. And that's when their mask begins to crack. They'll start asking mutual friends about you, carefully, casually, as if it's just small talk. They'll start reminiscing about the good times. They'll talk about how you were different, but you'll know what's really happening. It's not nostalgia, it's recognition. They're realizing the difference between attention and connection, between comfort and care, between control and love. They're realizing what they lost wasn't just you, it was the peace that came with being seen by you. And here's the irony. The more they try to move on, the more they carry you with them, because you can't replace what was rooted in truth. You can only distract yourself from it for a while, until the next quiet night comes, until someone new doesn't understand them the way you did, until they realize that indifference was never healing. It was avoidance dressed up as strength. They'll think of you then, not out of longing for what was, but out of grief for who they could have been with you. Because you were never just someone. You were the mirror that showed them their potential, the one person they could have grown with. if they hadn't let fear drive. So when you see them now, posting, laughing, pretending, don't let it fool you. Indifference can be a costume, and pride a prison. But truth always finds its way out. And one day, they'll look at you and see everything they claim not to care about. Standing tall, peaceful, unreachable. And that's the moment they'll break. Not because they lost you, but because they'll finally realize you never lost yourself. You mattered more than they could handle, more than they could admit. And pretending you didn't was the only way they could cope with the depth they weren't ready to meet. So let them act, let them convince themselves, because deep down they know, they always knew. And time will make sure they feel it. At first, they thought pretending would protect them, that if they stayed cold long enough, their feelings would freeze too. But emotions don't die from silence, they ferment. And now, the denial they built so carefully is starting to taste bitter. They can't explain it. The sudden restlessness, the moments where everything feels dull, even when life is good, it's because something in them still remembers the color you brought, the way you made. Ordinary moments feel alive. They don't miss the relationship. Not yet. They miss the aliveness. And that's how truth always begins to surface. Not through memories, but through the absence of what once made them feel. They'll start to notice it in the small things. A song lyric that hits too hard. A smell that throws them back to a moment they buried. A random sentence. That sounds like something you'd say. It's not nostalgia. It's exposure. Their guard is slipping. You became their ghost, without ever haunting them. Not the kind that lingers to punish, but the kind that reminds. You show up in quiet ways, in patterns, in people who don't laugh like you, don't listen like you, don't see them like you did. They'll keep trying to find you in new faces. But connection built on replacement is just loneliness wearing a mask. And meanwhile, you've changed. You've stopped replaying. You've stopped explaining. You've learned that closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your peace. You stopped chasing clarity and started becoming it. That shift, they feel it, even from afar. They can't put it into words, but something in their chest tightens when they sense you no longer orbit their memory. It's not rejection that hurts them now. It's irrelevance. Because for people like them, control was their language of safety. They needed to know they could still affect you, that you still checked, wondered, hoped. But when you went quiet, not to punish, but to heal, it broke their illusion of power. They thought distance would make you chase. Instead, it made you disappear. And nothing terrifies the ego more than realizing it's lost its audience. They start replaying things now. Your last message, the tone of your goodbye, the moment you looked at them. With that mix of love and exhaustion, they remember it differently each time. Because denial edits memory. But no matter how they rewrite it, the ending never feels right. That's how guilt begins, as a small discomfort that grows louder with silence. They'll start testing your absence. Maybe a text by mistake, a story posted at the right hour, something small enough to protect their pride, but loud enough to catch your attention, because they want to know if the door they slammed is still unlocked. But you've outgrown the threshold. You no longer wait by it. And that's what shifts the balance completely. Their friends will notice first. They'll ask, "Have you talked to them lately?" And they'll shrug. Too quickly. They'll say, "Oh, it's nothing." But even their friends can feel the tension in the way they change the subject. It's not nothing. It's everything unsaid. Because pretending not to care requires constant effort. And effort is the opposite of indifference. Now they dream about you sometimes. Not in romantic ways, in symbolic ones. You appear in strange places, as the one walking away, as the one they can't reach, as the one smiling while they stand still. Dreams don't lie, they just translate what the heart refuses to say. And when they wake up, there's that ache again, soft but persistent, a reminder that pretending has an expiration date because you can't bury what still breathes. Meanwhile, your peace starts radiating, your energy shifts. You've stopped needing them to see your worth. And that's exactly when they start seeing it. That's how irony works. The moment you stop trying to prove your value, it becomes undeniable. They'll notice it in the glow you carry, in your tone, in your calmness. When their name comes up, they'll sense it. That quiet confidence, that comes from knowing you were the real thing all along. And now the truth starts sinking in. They didn't lose someone who cared too much. They lost the one person who cared the right way. They didn't escape chaos. They escaped accountability. They didn't outgrow you. They ran from the growth you represented. And when life finally slows down, when there's no more noise to hide behind, the weight of all that will land, maybe it'll happen one evening when they pass by a cafe that used to be yours. Maybe it'll hit them mid-conversation when someone new laughs the wrong way. Maybe it'll just come quietly, as realization often does, not as a storm, but as a sentence whispered to themselves. I think I messed that up. That's not closure. That's consequence. Because people can only lie to themselves for so long before the truth starts showing through the cracks. And yours? It's showing. Every time they compare, every time they scroll, every time they replay what they once dismissed. They're not over you. They're haunted by the version of themselves that was loved by you. And yet, you don't gloat. You don't chase. You don't even need their recognition anymore. Because when you heal right, you stop waiting for people to notice. You just let your peace speak. And that's exactly what it's doing. Your silence is no longer about pain. It's about power, about peace that doesn't need proof. They'll feel that power. They already do. They'll look at your calmness and confuse it for indifference. But what they're really feeling is the consequence of underestimating you. You were never hard to love. They were just too scared to feel deeply. You didn't ask for too much. You asked for honesty, and they weren't ready to live without their mask. So let them wear it. Let them keep pretending, because every act of denial is another reminder of how deeply they once felt. And the longer they pretend, the heavier it becomes, until one day, it collapses. They act like you never mattered. But the truth? You became the quiet reference point for everything that followed. They compare without meaning to. They remember without wanting to. They care without admitting to. Because impact like that doesn't fade. It embeds. You didn't just touch their heart. You shaped it. And that's something no denial can erase. Denial can only last until life stops distracting you. And now, for them, the distractions are starting to fade. The people they ran to don't feel the same anymore. The conversations are lighter, but emptier. Every new connection feels like an imitation of something real, something they can't recreate, because they never faced why they lost it. They scroll at midnight through old photos they swore they deleted. They see your name still saved, but they can't press send. Pride stops their fingers, but regret pulls at their chest. It's not that they don't want to reach out. It's that they don't know how anymore. Because how do you speak to someone who found peace without you? They'll look at your life now, the way you've grown, the calm you wear like armor, the joy that no longer needs validation. And it'll hit them. They thought you'd always be waiting. They thought love made you predictable, but it didn't. It made you wise. They used to believe that silence was surrender. Now they know silence is strength. Because you didn't stay quiet out of pain. You stayed quiet out of power. And in that stillness, you rebuilt everything they broke. Without resentment, without revenge, without noise. That's what makes them ache the most. They're surrounded by people, but feel unseen. They laugh, but it doesn't reach their eyes. They try to fill the emptiness, but nothing fits. Because the truth is, you were never just a chapter. You were the turning point. And once someone meets love that pure, everything after it feels like background noise. You, on the other hand, are no longer waiting for closure because you found it in your peace, in your silence, in your growth. You don't replay old scenes anymore. You rewrite new ones. And your story now? It's not about what they lost. It's about what you found in yourself. When they left, they might come back one day, maybe not to stay, but to test if the door still opens. They'll send a small message, something harmless, something vague. Hey, how have you been? But underneath it is a confession they'll never say aloud. I thought you'd still be waiting. And they'll realize you've stopped being the version of you they left. You've evolved. You've expanded. You've become someone they can't reach with the same old words. Because healing doesn't make you harder. It makes you quieter, but deeper, softer, but stronger. You no longer respond to confusion. You respond to clarity. You no longer chase attention. You attract peace. And that difference? They feel it like gravity. They'll tell themselves stories that you changed, that you're different now. But the truth is, you just stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. You outgrew the version of yourself that tolerated half love. And once you evolve past that, you can never go back. The irony is, they finally understand your silence now. It's not coldness, it's acceptance. The kind of acceptance that says, I don't need you to understand why I walked away. I just needed to walk. They see it now. Too late, but clearly, because clarity always comes after the lesson costs you something. Their pride will tell them not to reach out, but their heart will whisper your name anyway. In crowded rooms, in quiet moments, in dreams that replay what they once had the power to keep. That's the ache they earned by playing indifferent to someone who only wanted to love them right. But here's the shift. You no longer need them to hurt. You no longer need them to see your worth. Because now, you've learned to hold yourself the way you once held them. With patience, with care, with grace. You became what you once sought. And that's where you win. Not in their regret, not in their realization. You win in the quiet power of no longer needing validation from pain. You win in knowing that love doesn't lose its value just because it wasn't reciprocated. You win because you stayed kind, but you stopped staying small. So if they return, you don't need to punish them. You don't even need to let them back in. You just need to stay rooted in what you've become, the healed version of you that no longer flinches at loss. Because once you've made peace with letting go, nothing can hold you hostage again. And somewhere, they'll realize it too, that they didn't lose the battle. They lost the blessing, the rare kind of love that meets you at your soul, the kind that doesn't compete or chase, the kind that only asks for honesty. They'll remember you, not as someone who begged to stay, but as someone who loved deeply, then walked away gracefully when love stopped being respected. And maybe years from now, when someone asks them, who was the one that got away? They'll hesitate, smile faintly, and think of you, not because you were perfect, but because you were real, the one who showed them what love could feel like before they were ready to feel it. And you? You'll be somewhere new by then, peaceful, grounded, unbothered. Because when you finally stop proving your worth and start living it, you don't look back. You just glow differently, move differently, love differently. And that glow, that quiet, healed energy, is what their memory will never outrun. You didn't lose them. You found you. And that's the kind of ending that doesn't need closure because it already has peace.